The wind howled through the skeletal branches of the trees, a low, mournful wail that sent shivers down Mark's spine. He tightened his grip on the flashlight, its dim beam cutting through the thick darkness surrounding Bolam Lake. The place had always been eerie at night, but tonight felt different. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching him. Mark had heard the stories, just like everyone else in the small Northumberland town. People spoke in hushed tones about the creature, something massive, something unnatural that lurked in the woods around the lake. A few dismissed it as a legend, but those who had seen it never joked about it. They spoke of glowing eyes peering from the underbrush, of deep, guttural growls that sent animals fleeing, of something that wasn't supposed to exist. He had always thought it was nothing more than local folklore, until his friend Jake disappeared. It had been just over a week since Jake ventured out here alone. He was one of those people who had to see things for himself, who laughed in the face of superstition. "It's just a big animal," he had said, brushing off Mark's concerns. Maybe a bear that wandered too far south, or some massive dog. Nothing supernatural about it. But the next morning, his car was still parked at the edge of the woods, his phone lying cracked on the gravel. And Jake himself. No footprints leading away, no signs of a struggle, just a chilling silence that had swallowed him whole. Now, as Mark stood in the very spot where his friend had last been seen, he regretted coming alone. He had promised himself he'd just take a quick look, just to prove to himself that there was nothing out here. But as he scanned the trees, every shadow seemed to move, every rustling leaf sounded like a whisper. A twig snapped behind him. He spun around, heart hammering against his ribs. The flashlight wavered in his grip, casting wild, dancing shadows against the trunks. "Jake." His own voice sounded foreign, hoarse with fear. Silence. Then, another snap, closer this time. Something was out there. Mark took a step back, his instincts screaming at him to run, but his body was frozen in place. The air felt heavy, charged with something he couldn't explain. Then, from the darkness, came the sound he would never forget for the rest of his life. A low, guttural growl, impossibly deep, vibrating in his chest like a storm rolling through the earth. The flashlight flickered. His breath hitched. And then he saw them. Not just any eyes. These burned with a sickly yellow light, too high off the ground to belong to any normal animal. They stared at him, unblinking, filled with something that wasn't just hunger. It was intelligence. And something else. Malice. A clawed hand, long fingers tipped with curved black talons, gripped a tree trunk, and the bark cracked under its strength. The creature let out a low, rumbling breath, stepping forward just enough for Mark to see its massive, fur-covered body. It stood upright, towering over him, more wolf than ape, more nightmare than reality. And as it bared its teeth in what almost seemed like a grin, Mark finally understood why the legends never called it Bigfoot. Because this thing, this beast, was something much worse. And it had found him. Mark couldn't move. His breath came in short, ragged gasps as the towering creature stared him down. Every instinct screamed at him to run, but his legs were locked in place, as if the very air around him had thickened into something solid, something pressing against his body, holding him there. The creature's eyes, burning, unnatural, didn't waver. It tilted its head slightly, studying him, the way a predator might watch a wounded animal. Mark swallowed hard, his throat dry as dust. He knew he had to do something, anything but what? His flashlight flickered again, casting brief, jerky beams across the forest floor. For a split second, he caught a clearer glimpse of the thing's body. It was covered in dark, matted fur, thick and tangled, but it wasn't just the size that made Mark's stomach twist. It was the shape. The proportions were wrong. Its arms were too long, hanging low past its knees, muscles shifting under the thick fur as it flexed its clawed fingers. Its shoulders were impossibly broad, tapering down to a torso that looked almost human. Almost, but not quite. And the face. Mark didn't want to look at it, but he couldn't help himself. It was like something pulled from the deepest part of a nightmare. The jaw was too wide, the teeth too sharp. The snout was elongated like a wolf's, but the features were twisted into something else, something that looked far too knowing, far too aware. This wasn't just an animal. It was something else. The thing took a step forward, the sound of its claws scraping against the bark of a tree sending a shudder through Mark's entire body. He willed himself to move, to turn, to do anything but stand there like a fool, but his legs still refused to listen. His mind raced, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. Could it be a bear? No bear moved like that. No bear had eyes that glowed like twin embers in the dark. Then the creature did something that made Mark's stomach drop. Grinned. Not a snarl, not an animalistic baring of teeth. An actual grin, as if it knew exactly what he was thinking. As if it was enjoying his fear. Mark felt a cold sweat break out on his skin. He forced his mouth to work. What do you want? His voice came out barely above a whisper, shaky and weak. But he had to say something, had to break the silence before it swallowed him whole. The creature didn't answer. Of course it wouldn't. That would be ridiculous. And yet, as it stepped closer, its breath heavy and ragged, something about the way it moved made Mark's skin crawl. It was too deliberate, too controlled, as if it wasn't just acting on instinct but making choices. A sound echoed through the trees then, a distant hollow knock like something hitting wood. The creature's ears flicked at the noise, its grin fading just slightly. Mark didn't know what it meant, but he didn't waste the opportunity. His body finally broke free from its frozen state, and he did the only thing that made sense. He ran. His feet pounded against the forest floor, dodging roots and fallen branches as he sprinted blindly through the trees. The flashlight bounced wildly in his grip, throwing chaotic shadows all around him, making the forest seem even more alive, more menacing. Behind him he heard movement. Heavy, steady. It wasn't crashing through the underbrush like an ordinary animal. It was following him, tracking him. Mark's lungs burned, but he pushed himself harder. His car wasn't far, just past the tree line at the edge of the old dirt road. He could just make it there if he could just get inside and lock the doors. A deep, guttural growl rumbled through the trees, closer than before. Mark's stomach clenched. He wasn't going to make it. A dull, flickering glow through the trees ahead. For a moment he thought it was his headlights, but no. His car was parked in the other direction. This light was softer, warmer. Fire. Campfire. Hope surged through him. Someone else was out here. Maybe hikers, maybe campers. He didn't care who they were. He just needed to get to them. Bursting through the brush, he stumbled into a small clearing. A single tent stood near the fire, a backpack propped against a log. And sitting beside the flames was an old man. He looked up at Mark's sudden appearance, eyes sharp beneath the brim of a weathered hat. "Easy there, son," the man said, his voice calm but firm. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Mark's chest heaved as he struggled for breath. "Not a ghost," he gasped. There's something out there." The old man didn't react with confusion or disbelief. He just gave a slow nod as if he already knew. "Aye," he murmured, tossing another log onto the fire. "That'd be the beast." Mark stared at him, his pulse still thundering in his ears. "You know about it." The man gestured for him to sit. "Been knowin' about it for a long time," he said. "Longer than most folks round here would care to admit." Mark hesitated, glancing back toward the darkened woods. He could still feel it out there, lurking, waiting. But the fire, the old man's steady presence, it was the first thing that felt even remotely safe. He sat down, still trembling. "Tell me," he said. "What is that thing?" The old man poked at the fire with a stick, watching the embers swirl into the night air. "Some folks call it Bigfoot," he said slowly. "But that ain't right. Not really." He met Mark's eyes, his expression unreadable. "Bigfoot's just a wild creature, an animal. But this thing." He shook his head. "This thing ain't natural. It ain't meant to be here." Mark swallowed hard. "Then what is it?" The old man let out a slow breath. "Some say it's been here longer than we have. that it don't come from this world. Others say it's something twisted, something that used to be a man but ain't no more. He stared into the flames. But me, I just call it what it is. Mark leaned in waiting. The old man looked up, his eyes dark and knowing. Demonic. The word sent a chill down Mark's spine. He wanted to argue, to say there had to be some rational explanation, but deep down he knew. He had seen the way it looked at him, the way it grinned. That wasn't an animal. That was something else. Something evil. The forest beyond the fire remained silent, but Mark knew the beast was still out there, watching, waiting. And he had a feeling this wasn't over. Mark stared into the fire, his mind racing with everything the old man had just said. The words still echoed in his head. Demonic. He wanted to argue, to tell himself it was just some massive, unidentified animal, something explainable. But he had seen the way it looked at him. It hadn't been just a mindless beast. There had been something else behind those burning yellow eyes, something dark, something that understood exactly what it was doing. The old man poked at the flames again, the embers crackling in the quiet night. The forest beyond the clearing was still. Too still. Mark knew the thing was still out there, somewhere past the flickering glow of the fire, watching. "You're not surprised," Mark finally said. His voice was quieter now, shaken but steady. "You've seen it before." The man nodded slowly, his face unreadable in the dim light. "Seen it more than I'd like to admit. Heard it too. But it don't come close to the fire. Not usually." Mark caught onto those last two words like a hook in his ribs. "Not usually." The old man sighed, rubbing a calloused hand over his jaw. "Ain't no rules with things like this, son. Just patterns. You watch long enough, you start noticing them. This thing, it don't just wander these woods for no reason. It chooses when to show itself." He paused, then added, "And who to show itself to?" Mark felt his stomach turn. "You're saying it wanted me to see it?" The man nodded again. "That thing out there, it don't hunt like an animal. Plays with folks. Likes to see how they react. Some run. Some freeze up. Some don't make it out at all." He tossed another log into the fire, and for a brief second, the shadows around them shifted, stretching unnaturally into the trees before settling back into place. Mark swallowed. "My friend. He came out here last week. Alone. I think it got him." The old man's face darkened. "What did he do?" Mark clenched his fists. He didn't believe in it. Thought it was just a legend. He wanted proof. "I told him it was stupid to go alone, but he didn't listen." His voice caught in his throat. "I found his car, his phone, but no sign of him." The old man didn't speak right away. He just stared into the fire, his expression grim. "Then he's gone." Mark felt something cold grip his chest. "Gone where?" The old man's gaze flickered up to meet his. "If the beast wanted him dead, you'd have found more than just his car." His voice was low, careful. "But you didn't. That means it took him." Mark's pulse pounded. "Took him where?" The old man exhaled sharply. "That, son, that's the question." The woods stretched out beyond them, dark and endless. Mark glanced over his shoulder, half expecting to see those glowing eyes peering from the shadows again. The thought of Jake, alone out there in the grip of that thing, made his hands shake. "We have to find him," Mark said suddenly, the words tumbling out before he could stop them. The old man didn't react at first. He just watched Mark, measuring him as if weighing the risk. "If it took him," he said finally, "he ain't in no place we can just walk up to." Mark's jaw tightened. "I don't care. I can't just leave him out there." The old man studied him for a long moment, then sighed. "You don't know what you're askin." Mark leaned forward. "Then tell me." The fire popped, sending a small burst of embers into the air. The old man shifted in his seat. "This thing, it don't just take people. Chooses 'em. And when it does, they don't come back the same." A chill ran down Mark's spine. "What do you mean?" The old man's expression darkened. You ever heard the stories? The ones about folks who go missing in the woods, only to turn up weeks later. Folks who can't remember where they been, or what happened to 'em. Mark nodded slowly. He'd read about those kinds of cases before. People vanishing without a trace, only to reappear miles away with no memory of how they got there. Some were found in places they couldn't have possibly reached on foot. Others came back different. The old man tapped his fingers against his knee. Sometimes they're lucky. Sometimes they're just lost. He hesitated. Other times they come back wrong. Mark's throat went dry. Wrong how? The old man's jaw tensed. Ain't themselves no more. They look the same, talk the same, but they ain't the same. He let out a slow breath. And if they are the same, they don't stay that way for long. Mark's mind raced. So you think if we find Jake, he might not be Jake anymore? The man didn't answer right away. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet. That depends on how long he's been with it. Mark felt like he couldn't breathe. He thought about Jake. His best friend, the guy who always cracked jokes at the worst times, who never took anything seriously. Was he still out there, trapped in the dark? Was he still Jake? Or had that thing already done something to him? A sudden noise snapped Mark's thoughts in half. A rustling, too deliberate, too close. Both men turned toward the trees. The fire flickered, casting long shadows over the clearing. The woods, which had been unervingly quiet just moments ago, suddenly felt crowded. Mark's heart pounded as he gripped his flashlight. The beam was weak now, the batteries barely holding on. He swept it across the trees, the light barely cutting through the darkness. And then movement. A figure stood just beyond the tree line. Mark's breath caught in his throat. His first instinct was that it was the beast, but no. This was different. The shape was wrong. It was human. His heart slammed against his ribs. Jake. The figure stepped closer. The firelight illuminated a face. It was Jake. Mark felt a wave of relief so strong it nearly knocked him over. Oh my God, Jake. He stumbled to his feet, ready to run to him, but something in the old man's posture stopped him. The old man hadn't moved. He was still sitting by the fire, his eyes locked on Jake. And his expression wasn't relief. It was something else, something close to dread. Mark hesitated. Jake. His friend stood just at the edge of the firelight, his face half in shadow. He was breathing hard, his chest rising and falling too fast, as if he'd been running. His clothes were dirty, torn in places. His hands hung at his sides, limp. Mark took a step forward. What happened to you? Where have you been? Jake didn't answer. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. Then very slowly, Jake lifted his head. Mark's stomach dropped. His friend's eyes, once a familiar warm brown, were wrong. They weren't brown anymore. They were yellow, burning, unnatural. Just like the beast's. Mark's breath hitched. He took a slow step back, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. Jake. His friend's lips parted slightly, as if about to say something. But what came out wasn't words. It was a low, guttural growl. And Mark knew in that instant that the Jake he had known was gone. Mark's blood ran cold. His legs trembled as he took another step back, his mind screaming at him to run, to get away. But his body wouldn't listen. Jake stood motionless at the edge of the firelight, his chest rising and falling in sharp, unnatural breaths. The shadows twisted around him, the glow of the flames making his face flicker between human and something else. His eyes, those burning yellow eyes, stared right through Mark, unblinking, unreadable. Jake, Mark's voice barely came out. It's me. For a second, something flickered in his friend's expression, something distant, almost familiar. But then, just as quickly, it was gone. The tension in Jake's shoulders tightened. His fingers twitched at his sides, curling slightly, as if he was resisting some invisible force pulling at him. Mark's breath hitched. You're okay. You made it back. He swallowed hard, forcing himself to step forward. "Come on, man, let's get out of here." The old man didn't move, didn't speak. He just watched, his expression grim, his fingers tightening around the stick he'd been using to poke the fire. Jake's head tilted slightly, his gaze flicking between Mark and the old man. Then, slowly, he took a step forward. The firelight caught the torn fabric of his jacket, revealing long, jagged scratches down his arm. Too deep, too raw. But there was no blood. Mark's stomach twisted. Something wasn't right. Jake opened his mouth, but what came out wasn't words. It was a breathy, strained whisper, like the wind through dead trees. "Mark." Sounded like him. Almost. But there was something hollow about it, something wrong. Mark hesitated, his hands clenching into fists. "What happened to you?" Jake's head twitched slightly, like a glitch in a broken video. His lips moved again, but the words came slower, as if he was struggling to form them. "Lost breath, then found." A cold shiver ran down Mark's spine. The old man finally spoke, his voice quiet, firm. "That ain't him, son." Mark's stomach dropped. "No," he shook his head. "It's Jake. He's been through something, but he's still in there." The old man's jaw tightened. "Look at his eyes." Mark didn't want to. He didn't want to see what he already knew. But when he met Jake's gaze again, it confirmed his worst fear. There was nothing behind those eyes. No warmth. No recognition. Just something ancient, something watching. The old man stood slowly, his posture stiff. "It's playin' with you." Jake took another step forward, and Mark's breath caught in his throat. The firelight wavered, casting eerie shadows over his face, making the sharp angles of his cheekbones look almost inhuman. His lips twitched upward just slightly, too slightly. That was when Mark realized it. The thing wearing Jake's face was smiling. His pulse thundered in his ears. He stumbled back, his foot catching on a root, nearly sending him to the ground. The old man grabbed his arm, steadying him. "Don't let it touch you," he murmured. Mark's heart pounded so hard it hurt. What do we do?" The old man didn't take his eyes off Jake. "You run. You don't stop. You don't look back." Mark's mouth went dry. "And you?" The old man exhaled through his nose. "I ain't runnin'." Jake, or the thing that had been Jake, took another slow step forward. His fingers flexed again, curling, twisting. His lips parted, and that same breathy voice whispered, "Mark, stay." It wasn't a request. It was a command. Something deep in Mark's gut screamed at him to move. His instincts, buried under fear, finally kicked in. He turned on his heel and bolted. The night swallowed him whole. His feet pounded against the dirt, branches whipping at his face as he sprinted blindly through the trees. The darkness was thick, suffocating, but he didn't dare stop. He didn't dare look back. Somewhere behind him the fire crackled. And then, sound. Not a scream. Not a shout. Something deeper. Growl. Mark pushed himself harder, his lungs burning. He didn't know where he was running, only that he had to get out. Had to get away. Then, another sound. A step. Heavy. Fast. Not alone. Something was coming after him. His pulse roared in his ears, his vision blurred by panic. He crashed through the underbrush, stumbling, catching himself, forcing his legs to keep moving. His mind was racing, screaming at him to think, to figure out a way to survive. Light flicker through the trees. Headlights. His car. Mark pushed forward, lungs burning, every muscle in his body screaming for him to stop. He broke through the last line of trees, his boots skidding across the dirt as he sprinted toward the vehicle. His keys, where were his keys? His hands fumbled in his pockets as he stumbled forward. Behind him the footsteps stopped. Silence. Mark's breath came in ragged gasps as he yanked his keys free. His hands shaking so badly he nearly dropped them. He jammed them into the lock, threw the door open, and scrambled inside, slamming it shut behind him. For a moment, there was nothing but the sound of his own breathing. Tap on the window. Mark froze. His head turned slowly, his pulse hammering in his skull. Outside, standing in the glow of his headlights, was Jake. He was smiling. And Mark knew, this wasn't over. Mark's fingers tightened around the steering wheel. His breath coming in short, uneven gasps. His whole body was locked in place, every muscle frozen with fear. Jake, or whatever was left of him, stood just outside the car, bathed in the harsh glare of the headlights. His face was too still, his eyes reflecting the light in that eerie, unnatural way. Then, slowly, he lifted his hand and tapped the window again. Mark flinched, his body screaming at him to start the engine to get the hell out of there. But his hands wouldn't move. His mind wouldn't process. 'Cause something was wrong, more wrong than before. Jake wasn't alone. From the shadows beyond the headlights, more figures emerged. First one, then another, then many. Women. Their faces were pale, their clothes tattered, their movements slow and stiff, like puppets being dragged along by invisible strings. Some of them were barefoot, their skin smeared with dirt. Their eyes, each and every one of them, glowed the same unnatural yellow. Mark's stomach twisted. They looked like they had been lost here for a long, long time. He forced himself to move, his shaking fingers fumbling for the keys still stuck in the ignition. He twisted them hard. The engine sputtered. He turned the key again. Another sputter. Slow, choked whine. No. Outside, Jake's lips curled slightly, his hand still resting on the window. The others stood behind him, unmoving, their heads tilted just slightly, as if listening to something Mark couldn't hear. Then all at once they stepped closer. A dozen figures, their movements jerky but deliberate, closing in. Mark's chest tightened as he slammed his palm against the dashboard. Come on. The car wheezed, then roared to life. Jake's smile widened. And then he lunged. Mark barely had time to react. He slammed the car into reverse just as Jake's hand slapped against the glass. The tires kicked up dirt as the vehicle jerked backward, the headlights slicing through the darkened woods. The others moved too, some reaching for the car, others darting through the shadows, too fast, too wrong. Mark twisted the wheel, his heart hammering as he spun the car around and gunned it. The figures blurred past the windows. Some of them ran. Some just stood there watching. Jake, or whatever he was now, stood perfectly still in the middle of the road, his head slightly tilted as Mark sped away. Mark's hands were slick with sweat, his breath ragged as he glanced at the rearview mirror. The road behind him stretched into darkness. No figures, no glowing eyes. But his gut told him he wasn't safe yet. He drove fast, barely blinking, his body still in fight or flight mode. His mind was racing, trying to process what had just happened, trying to make sense of something that defied all logic. Jake was gone. No, Jake was still there. But he wasn't Jake anymore. And those other people, where had they come from? How long had they been out there? His thoughts were spiraling when he suddenly noticed something up ahead. Light. A faint, flickering glow in the distance. Mark's pulse pounded as he realized what it was. A fire. Another campfire. Someone else was out here. He hesitated. Every instinct told him to keep driving, to get as far away from this cursed place as possible. But something else, something deeper, more urgent, told him he had to stop. Because if there was someone out here, they might be in danger. Just like he had been. Mark swallowed hard and made his decision. He slowed the car, pulling off to the side of the road, the gravel crunching beneath the tires. The fire flickered through the trees, casting long shadows against the trunks. He stepped out cautiously, leaving the engine running. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and smoke. His hands were still trembling, but he forced himself to move toward the glow. As he got closer, he heard voices. Low, muted, human. He exhaled sharply, relief washing over him. Maybe it was hikers. Maybe campers who had no idea what lurked in these woods. He had to warn them. But as he stepped into the clearing, his breath caught in his throat. It wasn't just one fire. It was many. A ring of them, burning low, surrounding a group of people kneeling in the dirt. At the center of the circle, a figure stood tall, clad in tattered clothes, their face hidden beneath the flickering light. The kneeling figures didn't move, didn't speak, didn't even blink. Mark took a slow step back, his heartbeat slamming against his ribs. One of the kneeling figures turned their head slightly, just enough for him to see their eyes. Yellow. Mark's stomach twisted into knots. This wasn't just a group of lost people. This was something else. And he had just walked straight into it. Mark's pulse pounded as he stood frozen at the edge of the firelight. The kneeling figures didn't move. The flames cast eerie shadows over their motionless bodies, flickering across their pale faces and those horrible glowing yellow eyes. His breath came in short, sharp gasps as he realized they weren't blinking. At the center of the circle, the standing figure shifted slightly. Though their face was hidden in the low light, their presence radiated something ancient, something wrong. Mark knew he had to get out of there. He stepped back, slow and careful, willing his body not to make a sound. But the moment his foot touched the earth, the figure lifted its head. A deep voice, smooth and unnatural, rolled through the clearing. "You shouldn't have come." Mark's throat went dry. His feet wouldn't move. The kneeling figures inhaled in unison, a deep, rattling breath that sent a shiver through Mark's spine. Then they turned to face him. Their movements weren't natural. Their heads tilted at odd angles, their limbs stiff and wrong, like marionettes waiting for their strings to be pulled. Mark's entire body screamed at him to run. But before he could move, the standing figure stepped forward. The flames flickered higher, and for the first time Mark saw its face. His skin was pale, stretched tight over his bones. His lips were cracked, his eyes hollow except for that eerie burning yellow light. He smiled, not like a friend, not like a person, like something wearing a human face as a mask. "You left me, Mark." His voice was calm, but it wasn't his. It was layered, distorted, like something else was speaking through him. "You ran. And now, you belong here too." Mark's breath caught in his throat. "I tried. I didn't know what was happening. I thought." Jake stepped closer. The fire reflected in his eyes, flickering like something alive inside them. "It doesn't matter now." Mark stumbled back, his heart hammering against his ribs. "What is this? What happened to you?" Jake smiled wider. "I saw it. In the woods. The thing that lives here. Took me, Mark. And now," he lifted a hand, gesturing around him. "I'm not alone anymore." The kneeling figures rose. Mark's stomach dropped as they moved toward him, slow but relentless, their glowing eyes locked onto him like prey. His entire body screamed run. He spun on his heel and bolted. Branches lashed at his arms and face as he tore through the woods, his lungs burning, his mind racing. The footsteps behind him were slow but steady, following, tracking. The night seemed endless, the trees stretching forever in every direction. And sound. Low. Rumbling. Growl. Not human. Mark skidded to a stop. Somewhere in the darkness ahead, something massive moved. The trees swayed. A shape, hulking, shadowed, shifted between the trunks. Beast. The thing that had taken Jake. Mark's breath came in ragged gasps. His body screamed at him to keep running, but his mind knew there was nowhere left to go. Behind him, the glowing-eyed figures closed in. In front of him, something ancient and monstrous lurked in the darkness. Trap. The shadows stirred. A deep, guttural sound vibrated through the air, rattling Mark's chest. And then two enormous eyes opened. Not yellow. Red. The figures behind him froze. For the first time, Mark saw fear flicker across Jake's stolen face. The beast stepped forward, the ground trembling beneath its weight. It wasn't just a creature. It was something else. Something that had been here long before humans ever set foot in these woods. Jake turned toward the kneeling figures. "No," he whispered. "Not yet." But it was too late. The beast lunged. A roar split the air, deafening and primal, as the thing in the trees tore into them. Mark barely had time to react before the firelight vanished in a blur of shadows and movement. He hit the ground hard, the impact knocking the breath from his lungs. Screams filled the night. Not human screams, something worse. Mark scrambled to his feet. His vision spinning. He had to move. Had to get out. Branches snapped. A shadow streaked past him. Something grabbed at his leg, but he kicked out blindly, breaking free. He ran. Through the trees. Through the suffocating dark. His car. It was still there, engine running, headlights cutting through the night. Mark threw himself inside, hands shaking as he slammed the door shut. In the rearview mirror he saw them. The figures. A beast. The fire had gone out. The woods were swallowing them whole. Mark floored the gas. The tires spun in the dirt before catching, launching the car forward. He didn't look back. He didn't dare. The road blurred beneath him, trees flashing past in a dark tunnel. He didn't stop. Didn't slow down. Only when he saw the first distant glow of city lights did he finally let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He was out. He had made it. But something told him. The woods weren't done with him yet. Mark's hands clenched the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. His breath came in short, ragged gasps as he sped down the empty highway, putting as much distance as possible between himself and Bolam Lake. The events of the night replayed in his mind like a twisted nightmare. Jake's lifeless, glowing eyes, the circle of kneeling figures, and the enormous shadow that had emerged from the trees. No matter how much he tried to push it away, the image of those red eyes lingered, burned into his memory. The road stretched ahead, empty except for the flickering glow of streetlights in the distance. He kept glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see something following him, but the road behind him was dark. Still, the unease in his gut wouldn't leave. When he finally reached the edge of town, he pulled into a gas station and parked. His fingers trembled as he turned off the ignition. The sudden silence pressed in on him, making the night feel heavier than before. He forced himself to take slow, deep breaths, rubbing his hands over his face. It was over. He had made it out. Jake. Mark swallowed hard, the guilt settling in his chest like a weight. He should have stayed. Should have fought harder to get him back. But was Jake even Jake anymore? That thing wearing his face, it wasn't his best friend. Not anymore. He got out of the car, the cool night air hitting his sweat-soaked skin. The gas station was deserted except for the cashier inside, an older man flipping through a newspaper. The bright fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, grounding Mark in reality, reminding him that the world outside Bolam Lake was still normal, still safe. He grabbed his phone from his pocket, fingers hovering over the screen. He needed to call someone, anyone. The police. What could he even say? That his friend had been taken by a group of glowing-eyed people in the woods. That a monster had saved him. They'd think he was insane. Instead, he did the only thing he could think of. He scrolled through his contacts, stopping at Jake's name. His thumb hesitated over the call button. Would he even answer? He tapped it before he could change his mind, pressing the phone to his ear. One ring. Then a click. A long, heavy silence. Mark's stomach twisted. Jake. His own voice sounded small, uncertain. For a moment there was nothing. Just empty static. Then a breath. Cello. Low. Mark's grip on the phone tightened. Jake, if you're there, please. Say something. Beat of silence. Then finally a voice. Not Jake's. You left him behind. The line went dead. Mark's heart slammed against his ribs as he yanked the phone away from his ear. His breathing was uneven, his whole body shaking. He stared at the dark screen, dread creeping up his spine. That voice, it wasn't human. It wasn't right. He turned in a slow circle, scanning the empty lot, suddenly feeling exposed. The gas station lights cast long, eerie shadows across the pavement. Every instinct screamed at him to get back in the car, to keep driving and never look back. But something in him knew it wouldn't matter. Whatever had happened in those woods, it wasn't over. Mark barely slept that night. When he finally made it back to his apartment, he locked every door, every window, and left every light on. But even in the safety of his home, the unease didn't fade. Every shadow felt too long, every noise too sharp. The events of the night clung to him, refusing to let go. Days passed, then weeks. He tried to convince himself it had been some kind of hallucination. Maybe exhaustion had made him imagine things. Maybe Jake had simply disappeared, lost in the forest, never to be seen again. But deep down Mark knew the truth. Jake wasn't missing. He was still out there. And worse, so was everything else. One night, as Mark sat in his apartment scrolling through online forums, he came across something that made his blood run cold. Post. Have you seen the people with yellow eyes? It was buried deep in an old paranormal forum, almost forgotten. The user who had posted it was long inactive. But the description it matched. The figures. The fire. The thing in the woods. Mark's hands trembled as he scrolled through the replies. Most people dismissed it as a hoax. But then, near the bottom, a single reply stood out. They don't take everyone. Just the ones who are chosen. Mark exhaled shakily, his stomach twisting into knots. He thought about Jake. The last time he had seen him, the way he had smiled. Like he had known something Mark didn't. A cold realization settled in his gut. Jake hadn't been taken. He had been waiting for it. Mark shut his laptop. His heart pounded as he stood, running a hand through his hair. He had tried to leave it all behind, tried to pretend it was just a nightmare. But it wasn't. The truth was staring him in the face. Whatever was in those woods, it wasn't done with him yet. And deep down Mark knew. One day it would call him back.